Scouts, you have one saying that you should leave the planet Earth better than you have found it.
I thought when you're running a company, it is quite obvious that you try to do some sort of social impact.
Well, I want to change the world, of course.
Making a difference and measuring it? The textile industry represents one of the biggest branches in today's economic world. The fashion sector is very dynamic and usually associated with trends and lifestyle. People identify themselves by wearing particular colors, cuts or materials, special brands or clothes from famous designers. Fashion is used to express oneself in the modern society, to represent oneself as a unique individual. But the glamorous, shiny side of the fashion sector comes at a high price. By taking a deeper look at the mechanisms of the textile industry, for instance its production processes, working environment or selling and marketing strategies, it is quickly noticeable that there's a huge gap between the people consuming the fashion and the people producing it. Negative effects occur all along the production process. But there exist alternative operating models for the textile industry. Next to the conventional fashion sector, which includes all known brands represented in almost every shopping center, the development of a fair fashion or slow fashion sector is noticeable, combating the mentioned negative impacts of the conventional textile industry. Within this growing fair fashion sector, Kipepeo Clothing, Umgekrempelt and Drei Freunde build three examples of enterprises pursuing a defined social mission in order to make a difference. Throughout this documentary, the founders of these enterprises will give insights about how their enterprises work in general, how they intend to make a difference, and to what extent social impact measurement is included in their processes.
My name is Martin, Martin Klack. I'm 35 years old, born and raised in Stuttgart. And the company I founded 10 years ago in the year of 2008 is called Kipepeo Clothing. Kipepeo means butterfly in Kiswahili, the language spoken in Tanzania and Kenya. And we are a manufacturer of organic garments on the east coast of Africa. The unique aspects of the products we sell are the designs. So all the designs that you find on Kipepeo adults, kids and baby wear were actually created during the regular primary school lessons at primary schools in Tanzania.
My name is Isabel and the name of the store is Umgekrempelt. I sell clothes here. But the important thing is that I sell textiles that have, an impact that, and the companies that produce them just turn everything inside out. So the whole production is different. So it's slow fashion, it's fair fashion.
Drei Freunde was founded 12 years ago, and our first goal was to produce the perfect t-shirt.
The rapidly growing consumption of today's affluent society represents one of the biggest challenges of current and future generations. The fashion sector is as much concerned as other sectors. The escalating consumerism regarding fashion wear leads to the abundance of clothes in our wardrobes, shoes in our shelves, or accessories in our drawers. Just to get an impression about the excessive consumption, in 2016, the annual household consumption expenditure on textiles and clothing in the European Union's 28 member states came to 512 billion euros, and the amount is still growing every year. The problem regarding these given circumstances is that we take this as part of our usual current reality. But not only the consumer behavior has to be considered when talking about producing and consuming clothes. The discussion has to go much further, including the gap between consumers' cheap consumption and fair and safe working conditions in the textile industry. While big fashion brands generate enormous profits, their workers in the producing countries, for instance Indonesia or Bangladesh, have to live on an average monthly wage of $150. These very low production costs can directly be linked to the devastating reality of insufficient payment and insecure working environments.
I mean, they know that in India it's cheaper to produce than in Germany, for example.
For a pair of jeans costing €50, the labor costs account for only 1% of the whole price, which is 50 euro cents.
My start in this area was actually the Rana Plaza factory crash in Bangladesh. It was in 2013. So more than 1,000 people died. And I started thinking about how we produce the clothes that we wear every day. And I found out horrible things.
Besides dangerous working conditions, negative environmental influences, such as exploitation of resources and water pollution through chemicals used for dyeing clothes, are another important aspect regarding the conventional production of textiles. Around 3,500 toxic chemicals are used in the production processes. This long-lasting pollution remains hundreds of years and affects humans and nature profoundly. In addition to that, the required amount of resources is huge. The production of one single pair of jeans, for instance, requires 7,000 liters of water.
When I got into textile manufacturing, and I think this is kind of a tricky field you're actually in, because it's the most polluting industry after the oil industry, for example. And if you read about sweatshops in Bangladesh or something, I really was shocked.
Changing these tremendous existing problems represents a big encounter for society and the economic world. Social entrepreneurs approach this challenge by building their business models in the textile industry not solely on economic targets, but instead on a clean and sustainable end-to-end supply chain. Their first objective is to truly consider all factors that are important for a socially and ecologically sustainable business model, such as paying fair living wages and including environmental friendly processes before profit is generated. By conducting business in this manner, the primary goal is to improve the existing situations and to attenuate the mentioned problems. In other words, principles come before profit, instead of profit before principles.
When I founded my company, I wasn't sure that there is actually a difference between a social entrepreneur and a common entrepreneur, because I thought when you're running a company or when you try to establish a company, it is quite obvious that you try to do some sort of social impact and that you pay the people working for or working with you with fair living wages, for example.
As a social entrepreneurship, of course, you're looking more on the issues on how you produce your articles, your products. And I think this is the main difference. You want to have an ethical, sound product.
I think the main difference is normal companies, they build CSR departments to they have their normal strategy and they put this on top. I do it the other way around. I take my values, so it's transparency, it's fairness, this is important for me. It's to produce things in a fair way and in an environmentally good way. And I take these things and I build my business around these values.
During the last few years, the meaning of social entrepreneurship became increasingly important and still gains more and more attention. Spots like the Fair Handeln Fair in Stuttgart represent a key meeting and information point for consumers and social enterprises. On the one hand, the enterprises offer their products and inform about their objectives led by their social entrepreneurial ideas and principles. On the other hand, consumers who are interested in fair fashion can get information regarding fair produced and fair traded products or have the opportunity to participate at talks about consumption behavior and fair fashion. An ongoing dialogue between participating social enterprises is also part of the fair. As mentioned by Isabel Kempf, the impact of social enterprises is of high importance, even if sometimes not noticeable in the first place. According to Jim Clifford, social impact is usually defined in reference to 4 key elements: the value created as a consequence of someone's activity, the value experienced by beneficiaries and all others affected, an impact that includes both positive and negative effects, and an impact that is judged against a benchmark of what the situation would have been without the proposed activity. But how can you generally ensure impact orientation?
As soon as we agreed on a project, building like a small building or something, it's quite a good example because it's easy to measure. Actually, you just calculate the costs. You know how much t-shirts you have to sell in which period of time, to actually cover the costs for an architect, for concrete, for construction workers and stuff like that. And so something like this is kind of easy to measure actually. And that's the same how we do it with the running costs, for example, school fees for different children. We just know school fees in Tanzania for this particular school is $30 a month, for example. These are so many t-shirts and whatever. So these points are quite easy to measure. And of course, as we are in a constant dialogue with the school projects we are supporting, we just need support from their side, on the project side, that they actually document the process of building, for example.
It's about personal relationships. So you have to use, beside that personal relationship, also standards. In the organic cotton area, it's, for example, the GOTS standard, which is Global Organic Textile Standard. And for fair trade, it's the Fair Trade label. So even if we trust our supply chain, we do encourage them to do additional audits, to and to provide us with cotton that is labeled with those GOTS and Fair Trade labels.
The important thing is to ask the questions and to find out, do they do a good job that I like, that correspond to my values? And only then I buy the things. These companies do have their impact, and I like to give them power to have even more impact by selling their products.
Measuring the impact of social enterprises is not a new phenomenon. One example is Kipipeo's social impact measurement approach. Kipipeo shows that even a very simple approach can be considered as social impact measurement.
Our customers or our supporters, they can also see the social impact we made in Tanzania. If you just look at our website, we show all the projects that we fulfilled in the last years in the project section.
Furthermore, Martin Klack explains since when Kipipeo is engaged in social impact measurement.
Basically since the very beginning, actually. I think, basically since 2008 when we started paying the school fees for the very first child we were supporting. So that was, we didn't know back then that this is some sort of like impact measurement, or however you call it. It was just the support we were giving. And since then we can show exactly, okay, this and that amount of money was donated in that period of time. These are the names of the children that were supported during that month. Actually, in the beginning, it wasn't difficult to measure because it was the support we gave was quite simple to measure. It was like there's a child in Tanzania whose parents can't afford their school fees. The costs for a month of school at a private primary school in Tanzania is $28. You sell a few t-shirts and then the child can go to school for a year. So this was basically that was basically it. So that's kind of simple. It was not difficult, and it was very easy to measure.
He further shows why it represents an important factor of his business.
If you don't measure it, actually, you can't really see, you can't really show the impact, can you? If you have a certain effect that results from your support or whatever, it is important to measure that support or that result, just to show the people that there's actually something happening or there's a change happening.
But is social impact measurement really the priority of every social entrepreneur?
I think a good way in a store to measure impact is also the turnover. So I have different types of products. So I repair things, I give workshops, and I sell jeans, t-shirts, and so on. So I can look at the turnover, and if it changes over time, I can tell that my impact is bigger than 1 year before, for example. So this is the way, but I don't have like a real thing how I especially measure social impact.
What is the reasoning of Umgekrempelt and Drei Freunde to not put an emphasis on social impact measurement?
Actually, I didn't think about the measurement because, in fact, for me, it's like the base of the whole thing, where I put my whole company on this. So for me, it's very obvious that it has an impact, social and environmental impact. This is why I do it. So of course it would be nice to measure it more. For me personally, it's not so important. It didn't come to my mind to put more focus on that.
Measuring the impact is quite hard because what is the base you start with? You could of course say if the base is conventional cotton and you're using, or we are using, fair trade organic cotton, you can see the gap and say, okay, we can measure that. But I would say what we are doing is the right. So we are on the base and the others are lower performing. So we are not kind of measuring. I mean, if we would measure and use the base of conventional cotton, we would accept that this is the standard. But we believe that the majority of suppliers or brands in Germany and all over the world are below the standard. They're all underperformer. I mean, it's in an academic view and for government purpose, it's always good if they can say, yeah, our products help, the water quality or whatever. But in my perspective, it should be like all the others are harming it. And they are harming it 20-fold more than they would if they would do it right.
You can even go further with regard to social impact measurement of social enterprises in comparison to solely profit-oriented enterprises.
You should be forced to measure the harming factor of your company, not the factor that you improve something. Because this is all about you. If you put that, they're the good guys, they're doing it 20% better or something, you put it in the wrong perspective.
Independent from the fact that some companies engage in social impact measurement and others don't, changes are indeed noticeable.
When you look at the whole society, I think there's maybe no change. If you're looking onto a smaller target audience, I think there's a lot of change happening. And if you're looking on the political level, which is also responsible for the whole, then there's also change happening because of us. In the beginning, when we started with that perfect t-shirt and we switched to organic and fair trade cotton, most of the time we were discussing why we did that. So people weren't aware of those problems on the farm level, etc. Nowadays, I don't have to explain that anymore. If you look on the political level, I would say 10 years ago, nobody was interested in what we did.
Taking this overall look at changes on society group, on target group, and on political level, social impact is also observed on production side and on beneficiary level.
So, for example, you pay the school fees for a child because you sold so many t-shirts, and that child can basically graduate from primary school and can afford because of our support going to the secondary school. But what happens next is the thing we don't really can influence. Because if the child, for example, decides, okay, now I have the educational background, I could go studying, for example, and because I did studying, I went studying and I did my degree, because KPPEO gave me the possibility for studying, then the child would actually be able to make some sort of impact for maybe the society as well. It depends where the child is going to, well, work or whatever. But this is something we can't really we can't influence.
I think the change that I can see is in positive feedback that I get. People come here and say, oh, it's so nice that we have a store for slow fashion now in Mannheim. And they appreciate if somebody is offering them options. And this is what I want to do. I want to offer options in slow fashion.
As emphasized by the presented social entrepreneurs, there is a clear agreement about the importance of impact orientation for conducting their businesses. Nevertheless, no common view is shared about social impact measurement in the field of social entrepreneurship. In general, measuring the performance and the social impact of social enterprises comes with a number of challenges entailed by many affected parties and perspectives which have to be considered. Most important for social enterprises is therefore the differentiation between the impact on target group level and the impact on society level. The latter one is very hard to quantify, and causal relations are nearly impossible to trace back to the very beginning. Consequently, the focus on the target group level is the most relevant and most efficient way to quantify social impact in any manner. Many social enterprises perceive themselves as part of a type of bubble. An observation reveals that numerous organizations in this social enterprise bubble pursue their social and economic goals by maintaining the rules and definition of social entrepreneurship in a similar way. Especially in the textile industry, the similarities between existing social enterprises and the fair fashion bubble are quite obvious. One possible goal regarding those similarities could be that these organizations start working together in order to improve different areas of their businesses and their impact orientation and measurement. An open dialogue between more experienced and less experienced social enterprises could hereby advance the awareness and practice of social impact measurement. Leaving alone all the possible approaches for implementing or improving social impact measurement, the interviews have shown that while a part of the practicing social entrepreneurs believes in the importance of social impact measurement, another part has a different view on the whole matter. Some of these entrepreneurs do not see the necessity for measuring their positive social impact, as this should be the only accepted standard. Some follow even the more radical view that the negative impact of the existing, solely profit-maximizing companies shall be measured and transparently communicated to society and consumers. They cannot understand why it is accepted by our modern society that cheap fashion produced under conditions which severely harm people and environment is still possible in global economy.
Our problem are the big companies, or maybe also those that are driven by shareholders, where responsibility and decision making and ownership fall apart.
This point of view shows very clearly that it is about more than just presenting some numbers about what a company is doing good, or more dramatically spoken, about what a company is doing better than another company. It is about making a real and sustainable difference for those who are affected by the consequences, whether this difference is measured or not.
Well, I want to change the world, of course. And I think every one of us can do it in the everyday life, because it's the small steps that count.